Now let's bring in Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol. Mr. Gosling, thank you for coming on. My first question, how do you interpret President Pezeshkian's remarks in light of Iran's obligations under the NPT and its rights to a peaceful nuclear industry?
Well, of course, everybody has that right, so long as it's a peaceful industry. The problem with nuclear weapons is most of the countries that have in the Middle East been developing them, that is to say Israel, have been doing so in a clandestine manner. Also, we have to always remember, I mean, this is important for people to remember, that in the 1990s there was an enormous Russian financial meltdown. So that is to say the currency was under attack. Many of the Russian soldiers had not been paid, and so there were predators around in the Soviet Union, as it still just about was at the time, prepared to pay cash for some of the nuclear weapons. Now, the Russian government now would say, oh, well, everything was very secure. But I remember seeing a documentary on the BBC, I think it was on the BBC Two in this country, in the UK. This is around about 1995, I'd say, or 96, which showed low loaders going into a nuclear store in somewhere in the Soviet Union. I cannot remember where. And then they filmed the vehicles as they were coming out, and they compared the levels of the axles on the vehicles, showing that something very heavy was inside these vehicles. Now, that doesn't prove anything, but what the team were proving at the time, this is in the days when investigative journalism was still alive here in Britain, that these sorts of materials could have been available on the black market. Roger Cook, who is a very famous investigative journalist here in Britain, also got access to weapons-grade plutonium from Russians in Moscow, selling it on the black market, and it was proven to be the real deal, this stuff. So I think we have to understand that there has been, for at least 30 years, a black market in the possibility of creating nuclear weapons. Now, whether they've been created, also several stray nuclear weapons have been, shall we say, lost as well, not found after an accident, a crash, or that sort of thing. And so I think we have to understand that there may be these weapons out there. But let's also remember, due to the work of Todd Ryder, Dr. Todd Ryder at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the Ryder Institute in the United States, has proven that this nuclear weapons technology is not US technology, it's not British technology, it's not even Russian technology, it's Nazi technology. He's shown the Nazis were developing this in the Second World War, most likely tested the first nuclear weapons in 1944. So if you really want to examine nuclear weapons, then that's fine. But I don't think that's what the regulators around the world are really interested in. They're just using these international bodies in order to further a political aim, which is around the state of Israel and Israeli supremacy. We've just had a release of a documentary in Britain which shows the former leader Jeremy Corbyn being told and bullied that if he became Prime Minister, he would have to swear before he became Prime Minister absolute allegiance to Israel and support for everything that Israel did. He himself was shocked by this, but it just shows you there is a force behind the scenes called the Israel lobby, which sees Israel can do no wrong. The rest of the world knows different. Everything that the Israeli government are now doing is wrong.
Absolutely. These Western countries that you talk about, Mr. Gosling, how willing and able are they going to go in their support for Israel in order to deter Iran in that sense?
Well, look, let's absolutely separate much of the establishment from the elite, because we have an elite in the West which is absolutely bent on power. They're not really interested in even hardly pretending to be democratic anymore. What we're seeing is a socialist, so-called socialist government in here, which is punishing the poor, which is starving the poor, which is bullying the poor for the benefit of the rich. So you can see that democracy has really fallen to pieces. We've had several incidents now just over the last few weeks of riots. There was rioting in Liverpool after the murders and after the accident with a crowd in Liverpool. There is a very, very angry population out there that knows that the government is not representing them, and it's almost as if any excuse, as we've seen in Northern Ireland the last couple of days, people will come out on the streets and start to riot. Now, there's one way that the government could deal with that, and that is by restoring some element of democracy so that the government is serving the people rather than seeing the people as the slaves and the servants of finance and government. But I don't think they're going to do that. So I think what we're seeing is a almost inevitable slide towards world confrontation. But the difference this time, I think, is that there's very little support here in the West for our own establishment. And the question is, will the establishment crack first? Because there are competing elements within the establishment, or will they get away with actually creating a wider war of some sort with the rest of the world? Because our elite here in the UK and in the United States and in Brussels are painting themselves into a corner.
Exactly. About that, Trump's been hinting at possible war while pulling troops and personnel out, claiming security concerns. Do you think that this is genuine preparation to conflict with Iran or just psychological warfare at this point?
Well, it's difficult to know, isn't it, with someone like Trump. I do feel that he has an element where he does have a sense of his own legacy. Many politicians, they just don't think beyond the end of their own nose and their own bank account. And Trump, I think, is somebody that does want to leave office with a positive legacy of some sort. He's understood now with Ukraine that he cannot stop it because it's a conflict which is being driven by King Charles, by the City of London, and by European forces. The Americans are finding it very difficult to stop that. But it's really the other way around, of course, with Israel, because Trump needs to understand, and there are big forces ranged against him, that he needs to pull the funding for the Israelis right now. As we've seen, some elements within the British establishment now starting to undermine the support for Israel. So, yeah, a very good question about whether he really means it and whether he actually can do it, and whether this is saber rattling, as you're suggesting. And honestly, I don't know. But I think there is an element within the Trump administration that wants to see a positive legacy in the future. Whether they can do that, it's always a political struggle at the very highest levels, these things. So let's hope he does.
Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.